And I just want to welcome all those visitors to John Moores University. I can recognise quite a few faces, but there are quite a few faces that I don't recognise, and you're very welcome to be here today, which promises to be a very special presentation. I'm going to introduce Professor Mary Marshall, OBE, and before Mary gives a lecture, and she said to me she's got no objections at all to people interrupting or asking questions or saying things during the course of the lecture, throwing tomatoes even. You know, please participate. That's what she would like to happen. And before Mary's going to do a lecture, I'm going to ask Gina Shaw, who is the co-chair of the SURF group in Liverpool, which is a users group of people that are living well with dementia. And Gina has been like the face, the very impressive face of raising the profile of dementia nationally and even internationally. Gina led the song with a little bit of help from our friends, which spread digitally across our television screens. So I just asked Gina to say a few words, please.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi everyone. Can you all hear me? Is this on? Yes? Great. Yeah, I'm Gina, and I'm really delighted to be here today, especially to meet Mary. And I feel really very privileged to be able to participate in these events that Bill and Bob invite us to, because I trained as a nurse, so until I was asked to help to design the new Alder Hey, I knew nothing about buildings or architecture. And this firm has really come and helped us to develop our knowledge, really, of how we can help to develop a better future for people living with dementia. And sometimes it seems like magic what they do. They can come and say, oh, why don't you try doing it this way? And it's like, yeah, why hasn't anybody thought of that before? So I see this and all of you being participants in this as a brighter new future for people living with dementia. So I hope you enjoy today. I'm sure you will. And please don't throw any tomatoes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm really delighted to be here. It's lovely being back in Liverpool. I'm slightly intimidated because some of the people here I know as much as I do about this topic, but that may mean that we get a very good conversation going. There's few enough of us to have a good conversation, so just wave or speak out or whatever. Let's try and keep it informal because that makes it more interesting for all of us. Right. I thought first I should explain what this Hammond business is about, which I'll do very quickly. Hammond is a massive Australian provider of a dementia care that's always had a dementia centre embedded in it. And it's decided to go international in a whole range of ways. And you'll be seeing all kinds of talks and things on a range of dementia topics advertised. But one thing they've done is set up a design service in the UK and Europe, which I'm part of, which is the bottom button there. And if anyone, hold on a sec, they're here. If anyone wants more details of that or of the upcoming design school, I've got leaflets here, so just come and get them. So this is what I'm wanting to talk about. Why is it so challenging to design dementia-friendly buildings? And it's a very brief introduction because normally our input on this takes 3 days, and some people here have done the design school and it does take 3 days. So it's just a kind of taster trip. And then I hope we're going to have a discussion between ourselves about what features and equipment and products and things you've found distressing. Then I'll do a professorial bit and give you some research. And then if there's time, I'll talk about colour because there's so many misunderstandings and mythology about colour. So we'll see how we go. The key messages, if you remember nothing else, just look at the red bits. So why is it so challenging? It's because most people with dementia are older, certainly not all, but most. And designing for the impairments of old age is a challenge in itself. The further complication is, along with the impairments of old age, people with dementia don't always have the ability to understand or cope or remedy problems that they're meeting. So the key word in all this is complexity. And it makes it a far more complex and difficult job than designing just for visual impairment or just for wheelchairs. It's possible, but it's much more difficult. And just briefly, a little chart to show you why I'm so confident about those people with dementia being old. This is from a thing called Eurocode, which is a European organisation that analyses all the data on the numbers of people with dementia in different age groups in different countries. And so it's averages, but you can see how, yes, there are people 60 to 64. Indeed, about 3% of people with dementia are under 60, which is a hell of a challenge because you're people with families and jobs and all kinds of things. But the vast bulk are up there in the 80 pluses. So that's the group on the whole we have to get it right for. A bit of further information about things to think about. I can't decide if I'm more comfortable sitting or standing. I was born in 1945, I'm just 70, which means that I'm the first stage, or slightly before the baby bulge. The baby bulge was 46 to 64. I don't think there's many people here in that age group. But we are a goat in the snake, and we're moving through, and we will at some point, a lot of us, get dementia. And that's where you get these very dramatic shock horrors and these terrible figures from. It's when this massive increase in people happens, and then we'll die. So it's not a permanent state of affairs. But it's a challenge for the services as they are now, which are creaking, when this massive group of people hit the needing help with their dementia. But it's very hard to predict, because as a generation, us baby boomers drink more than any generation's ever drunk before. A lot of us are obese. A lot of us don't take enough exercise. Yes, we treat our heart disease and our cancers better. So it's not a straightforward prediction at all. And the predictions are based on our parents' generation, who on the whole live fitter and healthier lives. And they're the generation that lives longer than any generations lived before. But whether we can make predictions on the basis of that is a moot point. And there's a recent research, Carol Brain at Cambridge is the leader of it, looking at some dementia statistics and suggesting the numbers are dropping slightly. She thinks it's because of better treatment of heart disease. But that's another puzzle which no one's really got an answer, and the extent of that's not known. Younger people, when I say complexity in old people, my experience of working with recently quite a lot of younger people with dementia on design issues is that they have many, many of the same impairments that older people have. Although I stress they're older, I think actually the problems are shared by the different age groups. So if we start with the impairments of aging, some impairments are normal and pretty much inevitable, and some things are age-related. You're more likely to get arthritis as you get older. You're more likely to get chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that's COPD, as you get older. But it's certainly not inevitable. So let's look at some of the normal impairments. You lose muscle volume at 1% from the age of about 25. So by the time you're 85, you've lost a hell of a lot of muscle volume. And you'll all know what this means. Poorer grip, bit less mobile. One of the important ones from the design point of view is your drooping neck, because your shoulder muscles are less good, so your neck droops. And do you know what proprioception is? Got any OTs here? It's a quick lecture on proprioception. All your joints have sensors in them that feed information back to your brain constantly. So I don't need to look at my feet to know where they are, or my hands to know where they are. My brain's getting that information. But as you get older, it diminishes. Actually diminishes more if you've got arthritis and plastic joints, because that just eliminates it. But the result of that is you're less confident about where you are in space and where you're putting your feet. And you'll notice an awful lot of older people walk like this, watching their feet. And that's because they're no longer getting the information normally up through their brain about where their feet are. And you see people with dementia banging into furniture if it's too close together, because their sense of where you are in space is diminished. So furniture needs to be further apart. So just a little implication of all that muscular stuff is that the cone of vision for information, and here's a terrible toilet sign, it's too high and it's meaningless. The cone of vision is sort of here, and that's where important information, like where the toilet is and where key rooms are, needs to go. Your lungs, mine aren't in top nick at the moment, I've got a cold, but we lose lung capacity from the age of about 40 unless we're cyclists or we play the bagpipes. So by the time you're 85, your muscles here, your diaphragm and the muscles at the side of your lungs are not pumping nearly well enough. But we all have to get enough oxygen to make our brains work well. And we therefore have to breathe in increasingly good air as we get older, because we're breathing in less of it. That's what that's for. I was rather hoping the air quality in here would be so bad that I could show you exactly what that meant, but it isn't. It's rather good. It's clearly a good ventilation system. A lot of training rooms that we work in, that thing is peeping like crazy the whole time. And a lot of the environments we care for older people in, like care homes, have very poor air quality. The windows are shut. There isn't a properly maintained ventilation system if there is one. And you get people like this all day. And that's partly because they're just not getting enough oxygen. Your ears, actually, who's here who's got a hearing problem? Nobody. What have you got?
I've never been identified, but I've got lost in one of my ears.
Yeah, which is quite, I bet you know loads of people like that, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a musician, so I know.
Oh, right. The people are very tuned into it. But nearly always there's people with some degree of hearing impairment. But it's inevitable as you get older that your hearing goes off, and what goes off is your ability to hear high frequencies. And that you can do all kinds of tricks with students of playing, and you can tell people's almost their exact age by whether they can hear the higher frequencies. But what that means for those of us who are older is that separating important things like someone's voice out from the noise, say, of clutter in a cafe is increasingly difficult, because it's all low frequency, and someone's nodding there. Have you got that experience? It's very, very wearing, and you have to concentrate really hard to hear what you need to hear. And some people, especially people with dementia who don't know have always an appreciation of what the problem is, get very angry and upset. And we do have to think about quiet spaces. Here's a little quieter space for you. It's a little sitting room in a care home. It's smaller. It has cushioned vinyl on the floor. It's got, actually you can't see it, there's a sofa on the left. And that on the right there is an acoustic panel. Very useful to have additional sound absorbency, and can be an attractive picture as well. That's an Ecophon one for those who are into this stuff. Your eyes, obviously crucial if you've got dementia. You rely very, very heavily on your eyes. But, and it's a painful experience, as you age, your lenses get hazier, thicker. And when the optician says to me, well, she said, it's getting fibrous, which is pretty pretty depressing. And it will get more fibrous, she said. And I'm going for an eye test next week, and I think it is more fibrous. And that's that's absolutely inevitable. We all get more fibrous lenses, and that cuts the light out. Has a lot of other difficult consequences too. So the world looks hazier, perhaps a bit yellow. It's very hard to discriminate between tones, so you need a lot of contrast to see contrast. You lose the ability progressively at the blue, green, purple end of the spectrum to differentiate colour. I can no longer do navy and black unless I have a very, very bright light. I have to take my trousers to the window to see, which is a real pain in the neck. You find you put the wrong clothes on. And the moral for you designers is don't expect people, don't rely on colour, hue that is, because a lot of people won't see it. It's very hard, increasingly hard to adjust to light levels when you come in from outside. Glare, I don't understand why glare. I don't know the biology of this, but glare becomes very painful. You'll have seen a lot of people with dementia when the light gets very bright, getting quite upset. And you need twice the level of lighting, at least. My optician said to me, your sight's really very good, you just need more light. And I am aware that I go towards the window if I'm doing some darning or reading small print or something. So here's a loo. So you have to remember what doesn't contrast is invisible. And in this room, the toilet's more or less visible because of the floor, but nothing else is. The ones here, I don't know if any of you have used the loo here, aren't bad at all. There's a charcoal fascia with the white grab rails and loo and basin against it, and they do stand out really, really quite well. Someone thought about that. The thing that doesn't stand out is the hand dryers, which are white on a white wall, apart from being a very perplexing piece of equipment if you've got dementia. Anyone with anyone got severe visual impairment? Because I suspect someone with visual impairment wouldn't be able to see them either. But it's very distressing to go to the loo if you can't see what you need to see and find things. It's actually terrifying. I'm finding increasingly that people don't get it in regard to furniture. They're beginning to get it in regard to the toilets, but these are two very recent. That was from a press release of a care home, that one on the left, last week. Because one of the journalists who'd received the press release rang me up and said, have you had a look at this? Because you can't see the chairs, can you? No, you can't. The white chairs. And this here is a lounge in a housing scheme in Northern Ireland, which a chap was very proud of, all kind of shades of cinnamon. But you actually, if you had sight impairment, you couldn't see his furniture, especially if there was no sun coming in. The sun is throwing a bit of reflected light. But those chairs would be really dangerous. And the trouble with chairs don't contrast is people lower themselves and they miss and they hit the arm. And before you know where they are, they've slid the wrong way and fallen on the floor. And it's completely unnecessary if you understand about contrast. So I've got a thing on at the moment about furniture. Needing to go to the WC more frequently. Sorry about this. It's a fact you will have to learn to live with. But it does mean people get very anxious about going to the loo and desperate if they can't find it quickly. And you can't have too many toilets, really, if you've got dementia. You need to get there sharpish. In fact, probably if you're old, let alone got dementia.
Mary, do you think that like in domestic situations, toilets are important? What about toilets in public places?
As many as possible. We've got a horrible problem going on in Edinburgh at the moment, which is they're closing public toilets. And a group of us have got very involved saying, you can't do this. You know, as the population in Edinburgh, which is where I live, is ageing, you'll have all these desperate people and you're taking them away. It's quite the wrong point to be taking public toilets away. Because what will happen, either people will go out and wet themselves, or they'll go out and get very agitated, which will spoil the outing, you know, suddenly have to come home very quickly, or they won't go out. People with dementia have often said to me, we've given up going on holiday or going away. It's too difficult. Can't find the toilet. When we get to it, we can't work it. It's just not worth the hassle, which is a real tragedy, isn't it? excluding a whole very large number of people from normal life. Do chip in and ask questions, won't you? Or make observations.
Restaurants don't allow people to use their services neither if there aren't any around.
Well then, do you know, it's interesting you say that, because Edinburgh's solution when we scream and shout about this closing public toilets is people can use it in restaurants.
They don't know.
And they're not geared up for large numbers of people trailing into the restaurant to use a toilet. Come on. I think it's really serious. There is getting to be quite UK-wide protest, actually, if you look at web pages at the moment, saying this can't be allowed. Especially not now with our ageing population and in the next, as the baby boomers grow older.
Have you ever been to a bank with the toilet?
No.
I'm often raising this with Barclays Bank. Why don't we have toilets in banks? It seems so obvious.
We ought to have them everywhere, I think.
Particularly when people are queuing, you know.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So they find they're desperate and have to go and find one, lose their place in the queue, get agitated, forget they need to go to the bank. It's all a big mess. Anyone else want to say anything about toilets? I'm afraid those of us in dementia design go on about toilets.
The toilets.
Right, go on then.
As a baby boomer,
You are you?
Lots of the points that you've made are actually like a common experience, aren't they? I'm thinking of things like the acoustic environment and not being able to distinguish his voices in a noisy restaurant. But I've never come across any information in a doctor's surgery or anywhere like that that would explain that to me or to all the other baby boomers sitting around in the room. And I just think there's this kind of informational thing about the process of getting older that will just make things so much more anxiety reducing.
And the public would be more alert, wouldn't they?
If you just knew, you'd say, okay, I can't do noisy restaurants. I'll go to quiet ones. Do you know what I mean? It's just, if you just knew, but they're not. But the information isn't really there. And I know you produce lots of leaflets and things like that, which are great. But they don't.
Remember, I've changed employers. I don't think the next employer does lots of leaflets. It will.
Well, I've never seen it in a doctor's surgery. And
No.
Sue, my wife, is a nurse. She's never seen it.
No. And the other thing that happens is that people who are teaching design and disability focus on younger people with disabilities, rather than this terrible mixture of impairments all going on at once, which are so problematic. It's a big job to be done in raising awareness of all this stuff. But we're the people to do it, us baby boomers.
Well,
we're used to shouting and jumping up and down.
Well, so the baby boomers have changed everything every stage, haven't they?
So this is the next one.
To World Wide Web. You know, we've done it, so we're going to do something about what happens now.
Aging. Yeah, right. I'm up for any of that. There's other things that complicate this picture, as you can imagine. Age-related conditions, which get more common as you get older. If your illness, and those of us who know a lot of people with dementia will know, if people are off colour because they have an infection or a bad cold, everything goes. It's really hard. Medication, a lot of medication makes you more confused or more sleepy, so it's harder still to cope with your dementia. And depression and anxiety are very common in late life, let alone for people with dementia, which make it even more difficult. But if we quickly, and I'm sure you all know this stuff, talk about dementia itself. I don't plan to deal with all the huge list of conditions you've got in your book, but just 3. But what I would want to say right at the beginning is that these diagnoses are pretty haphazard business. A lot of people have more than one. And everyone who experiences dementia has a very, very different pathway through it. So I get nervous about generalising, but you have to really. And it is affected by a whole lot of other things. How confident you feel, your self-esteem, how loved you feel, whether the people around you understand and help, how healthy you are, all sorts of things. I could go on at length about each of these, but I won't. So Alzheimer's disease, you'll all know what that is. It's slow progression, these nasty toxic lumps. But the thing you may not know is the bottom bit, which is that some people are even talking about Alzheimer's as a cognitive and perceptual condition. and that these are people who are much more like... Perceptual problems are not limited to people with Alzheimer's disease. I know younger people with them, but if you've got Alzheimer's disease, more than the other dementias, you're quite likely to have a perceptual problem. And what that means is you have a problem seeing 3D. And interestingly, we were discussing over a coffee upstairs, I don't know if you noticed the light grey and the dark charcoal floor that changes quite markedly upstairs, which for someone with perceptual problems would be a step. I'm amazed people don't fall over it more often. There was a black area around the places where you sat down, which I thought was really stupid because people need to step over to sit down. Complex patterns. This is a carpet in a hotel in Dublin, and I was taking this picture, and a lady coming the other way said in a very Irish accent, she said, "You wouldn't want to be in hallucinogens, would you?" I went, but I've got a whole bank of hotel carpets. I've got one other picture, but it's dire what they're up to. Specks look like litter. You see people with dementia bending down and picking up specks off a floor. And stripes look like bars. Do a lot of advising wallpaper manufacturers and fabric manufacturers to not do things that are too stripy. Any questions? Because just shout out.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Go on.
I could ask you to speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Foz. I should stand up probably. Go on.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work with designing buildings around accessibility.
Yeah.
And we've moved from sort of mobility, hearing impairment, visual impairment, that type of thing, towards trying to address some of the dementia issues.
Yep. We being...
Sorry, we're architects, Walker Simpson architects.
Right.
One of the things that I'm fascinated by is that it doesn't look to us as though it's actually a category you can define. Actually, all buildings will benefit from having these issues addressed.
Absolutely.
In an earlier slide, you
Yeah,
were
go on.
talking about various conditions. Have we got any statistical information about, say on a railway concourse, how many people are experiencing difficulties with the environment they're in? Has any research been done into that? Because it feels like it's not just sort of 80 plus people using those spaces who are experiencing these things. There will be a big percentage of people who are feeling it, won't there?
And everything that I've talked about applies equally to learning disability, to alcohol-related brain damage. So there's a lot of major other groups of folk who are living amongst us with exactly the same difficulties.
So within a public building, a good percentage of people would benefit from these...
30% in any general hospital.
30%, okay.
I mean, you're spot on. Us baby boomers are in amongst you, and we have a set of very complicated problems, which are not addressed.
1964, so my mother claims I am one of the very last baby boomers.
Oh, right, well, join the club.
I have experienced something at the entrance for a building just opposite the Central Station. I don't know if it's St. John, opposite St. John's between those two. The actual entrance of it, where the basically where you wipe your feet, it's stripes. So I understand that it doesn't. If it's all black, then it appears like a black hole.
Yeah.
But it's got metal stripes, and then it's got and it's very disorientating for me when as soon as I see it, I have to look away because it feels like marble effects, and it's just very, So it's
A lot of people with dementia in your living lab talked about that, didn't they? It's presumably the same bit of floor because there was a photograph of it, and they really dislike it. It's frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black mat with the metal strips.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a lethal mixture of black and shiny. It's just not clever.
And stripes.
Yeah, not clever.
So I think it goes across.
Absolutely.
Really
You mean you presumably haven't got dementia, so not as far as you know. No, but I think you're right. This just shouldn't happen. Anything that makes people feel ill at ease and uncomfortable and uncertain, it shouldn't happen.
The Apple shops all feature very nice glass staircases.
Foz was talking about this last night with one that has a beam under the landing or something.
Landing that looks like a tread.
Yeah.
And people can potentially step on it as a tread and tumble straight. That's crackers, isn't it?
Don't worry about it because you won't find the door of the shop in
But there's a whole, as Bill was saying, awareness job to do here, isn't there? we're building problems about falls, if not anything else.
Mary, are there
Yeah.
any places where these issues of design, in your experience, are actually being taught? That there's like a difference between recognising the problem and actually actively doing something about it. Because it seems to be are there any places where design of that kind is...
Do you mean schools of architecture, Rob, or...?
Well, they might help, might they?
I'm not aware that it's being taught in any particular... Hull, which is an offshoot of Leeds, has got a one-term option for designing for dementia. But that's the only place that's come near me to ask for advice and help with it. I don't know anywhere else. It surely must be, mustn't there? I don't know, but it does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? So we go forth, us lot, and sort it out. Vascular dementia, which is probably implicated in all dementias, which is why better treatment of heart disease will reduce the numbers of people with dementia, is important only because it changes so quickly. You get it right one day and then some incident happens and it's all wrong. And Lewy body dementia, where you have Parkinsonian features, are a very unfortunate group of people who are much more likely to fall over and who therefore need a very carefully considered environment to reduce falls. And we know that this design stuff does reduce falls because we've got tons of data about that. And that's very important for that group in particular. So I'm very quickly going to look at the impairments of dementia. And those, I know there are plenty of people in this room who work with people with dementia. This is really crude. But we're talking about some key impairments. And designing for impaired memory, especially recent memory, means you need to be able to see things if you can't remember them. And you often need them to be familiar or you won't recognise them. Glazed doors and walls are really helpful. This is a glazed kitchen cabinet in a Hanover housing scheme. And they did a major refurb of a housing scheme and made the whole thing dementia friendly, which I thought was really sensible. Because it's not a big deal, is it, putting in some glass-fronted cabinets when you're refurbishing the kitchen. If you've got impaired learning, you need to be able to see things in rooms if you can't remember them. No, hold on, I'm reading the wrong slide. Oh, that sounded wrong. Sorry, I'm getting in a muddle here. Let me go back to this one. You can't rely on people to be able to learn where things are. And you often, I was talking to my friend Anne this morning about her mother-in-law who has moved house in her married life and seems to have gone back to the first house she was in and simply cannot any longer navigate her way around a house that she's been in for a long time. But she's slipped back to some point before she moved there, and she's at great risk. So people get particularly distressed if they can't find the toilet, and then people endlessly saying to us, why are toilet signs so garish and childish? They don't need to be. This is a perfectly sensible one, but they can be really helpful. This is one I've been trying to promote for use in churches, because churches were getting very aerated about the options available and saying we don't want that in our church. But I actually don't think this one would offend anybody, would it? So impaired learning I'm sorry, I've mistyped that. It should say reasoning. And that means not being able to work out how things work. And one of the real problems at the moment is dryers. I don't know if you've noticed this with the people with dementia you work with, but dryers are an extremely complicated business these days. The ones here have no instructions. They're all Dysons, they're all this thing. But they're just in a row. If you didn't know what they were, you'd walk out of the toilet with wet hands and think, what the hell do I do now? Apart from anything else, if you stand close to them, they have the noise of a road drill, so they're not nice to use if you have a hearing impairment. But that is the Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh. It's a grey machine on a grey wall. And the ones upstairs are white on a white wall. So not only can you not work them, you can't see them. It seems really elementary. This stupid thing over here, it's in a cafe in Edinburgh. And instead of having you know what you do, you wave your hand here. But instead of saying that, or have a little arrow saying wave your hand here, they have a no smoking sign. I think it's really stupid. I keep meaning to have a word with the manager and say, you know, it's not okay to wash your hands and then, well, I suppose you just try them on your trousers, but that's not really okay. And this is this is the Telford Conference, International Conference Centre I was in recently, and they've had a go at making their taps more understandable and made a complete pig's breakfast out of it. It's just crackers. I don't actually think that's correct. If you pull that lever tap, I think you'd break it.
I think that's the instructions for the hokey cokey.
I maybe should write an email to the manager. I mean, I don't know what the story is, but there it is. It's in all the disabled toilets, this sign. Very strict.
That you yourself should share my alternative.
Good point. Good point, yes. You can see someone getting a complete twist, can't you, with their they need to wash their hands. They've come out of the loo. And they're completely stumped. I have watched people with dementia being terribly upset, actually, with not being able to work taps.
Trained toilets.
Yeah.
Above the basin, it says dryer, water, soap, and they're all underneath, so you don't.
Yeah, so if you didn't understand that, you'd be utterly foxed, wouldn't you? And you'd go out of there feeling revolting. It's not
If
okay.
you can get out.
Yeah, well, so this is a cry from the heart. Yeah.
You know these revolving doors, so often
Oh.
people caught with their pants down, literally.
Oh, me too. I've been caught with my pants down. It's not clever, is it? Right. Any more confessions? So high levels of stress. There's a lot of good research on clutter. And it's very hard to persuade people, like people working in hospitals, to avoid these multiple signs about hand washing and infections and everything else, to cut it out. Don't know what it's like in your hospitals, but it's a big deal in a lot of the ones we visit. Stick them somewhere where people need them, but don't cover the place with them, because it's like this stupid door here, which is a community centre, actually. Avoid noise, and I seem to have written noise twice and written it in red at the bottom, but I do think it's the great, as Bill said really, unseen impairment. Keep it calm, keep it simple. It's none of it difficult. Okay, and I thought we should have a bit of a... Go on.
I visited a community home where there were elderly people and people living with dementia. And it's the first time I've been there, and I've got dementia as well. So I said, where's the toilet? So they showed me where the toilet was. But the toilet door was a white door. And when you went into that space, it was all white. And then to get through to the actual toilet was all white. So when I came to come out, I couldn't find a way out. And I ended up having to bang on the door for somebody to let me out.
It's not okay, is
And
it?
and
It's terrifying.
It does increase your anxiety.
Of course it does.
Completely, you know. So I did have a word with them when I came out, suppose.
I was in the Edinburgh College of Art last week, and their toilets were one straight bank of wood. And what you had to know is they were doors.
Yes.
I mean, you know, you'd be cross your legs and you think, what the hell do I do? It's a toilet in here.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's little things, isn't it, that can make a big difference.
Yeah, and you need confidence to work it out. But if you have no confidence and you can no longer work things out, it's hellish.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say, why don't we share some examples of hazardous design, which we've already started doing with Virgin Trains and this community place.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to chip in with some?
So I think that what the difficulty is that modern design is all about minimalism and everything being white. People who are perhaps picking nursing homes for their parents are looking for that, are looking for modern, sleek design, thinking that they're doing the best thing by them.
Looking for hotels, really, aren't they?
Yeah, but
Couldn't agree with you more.
you know, they're not
No.
doing that. They're actually, they should be looking for things like, I wouldn't have known about contrast with older people.
I work with a little group of architects, all now with Hammond, And we spend a lot of time in care homes, and I had an altercation with a new care home company recently who was showing me their brochure, and I said, these just all look like hotels to me. You're meant to be offering someone a home. You know, it doesn't look the slightest bit homely.
Yeah, but it sort of compounds the fact that you probably feel guilty about putting your parents in one to begin with, and you think you're doing the best for them, but actually you're not.
And maybe increasing numbers of Bill says leaflets that say remember to check that the toilet and grab rails are visible for carers when they're looking, at least so that they can find them safe even if they're not homely.
Yeah, definitely.
Some of them are really unsafe.
Even things like extra care housing, you know,
Yeah.
built for over 55s, don't get it right. I mean, my auntie who was in the mid-80s moved into one, and she wasn't really settling. It was beautiful, you know, people were coming saying, oh, I could live in this, you know, looked like a really nice apartment. And what she really was missing was a fireplace.
Didn't have a fireplace?
No. She couldn't, you know, she couldn't really settle, oh, what am I going to put my ornaments on, and, you know, where's it? So
where do I sit?
Well, yeah, we went to the market and we got her a, you know, like a plywood fireplace, put it on the wall, and she was more happy with that. But it was the, you know, aesthetics. Try taking a rug off an older person, you know, it's just, you know, no matter what physiotherapists or anybody else say. And then, you know, the furniture, like you said, that the children might buy isn't that, you know.
Do you know, I had a MSc student once looking at why people won't take mum's old stuff to them when they move into care homes, because they won't. And the kind of responses he got were things like, well, mum's old stuff is rotten, you know, it's old and it's scruffy, and we don't want people thinking that's what we think about our mum. But actually it's what mum would recognise and feel comfortable with. So there's a whole world of difficulty there, because I can see why, but it's an awful shame, isn't it? I've started sticking on things in my house, saying this has to go with me. Just a few key ornaments and some pictures. If they don't take anything else, they've got to take them.
Mary, I say to mental health nursing students who are very often late teens, early 20s, majority under 30, and I'll say, you're 89, you're in a residential or nursing home. There are 5 things that I want you to, you know, say that you're not going to compromise on. That's what you really want, you know. And, you know, everything, you know, there are people, nobody ever has the same 5 things, but there's the same 5 core things that are no different from a person of 80 odd would want now. No. So, you know, it's common sense, isn't it?
It's common sense, but it's difficult because they're often out of date. They don't look nice in these modern places. Yeah.
Bill and I went to a new low-secure mental hospital in Liverpool called the Cloth, and they've got a dementia wing for about 20 people, and at the entrance to each room there's like a corner of the wall is like a perspex container, and people were encouraged to put their personal possessions in it, so that when they walk along the corridor or they enter the room, they can see, you know, which
nice in theory,
and
but I spend a lot of time in care homes and hospitals, and they're generally speaking empty. Or the staff have put a postcard in, or someone's put a photo in. People don't get it.
these were probably quite early days, really, so maybe...
Well, there may be a very enlightened and enthusiastic bunch of nurses who just chivied the relatives. But it's the saddest. The mental health unit in Edinburgh, presumably similar, got one, and there wasn't anything in a single box. And you thought, you better not have the boxes rather than say nobody cares enough to put something in my box. It was so poignant.
I mean, it can look a bit contrived, can't it?
Yeah.
But I think also what Denise is saying is that there are people, and there were people at that event in Milton Keynes that design and construct these pop-up structures that you can put in a room.
Yeah.
And again, I think they're really contrived things, you know.
So do you know what we're talking about? They come folded, and you open them up, and there's a a thing of the size of that screen, which might be a pub or a seaside or a bar, but it's completely fake. And then you can buy the bits to go in front of if you want, like you buy a bar counter and some equipment to stick in front of it. I got very mixed feelings about that stuff. Why can't you do the real thing?
The 4D, you know, the immersive technology where somebody could be in they could be in a dance hall or something like that. I have real issues with that because people might think it's a good idea to buy them, and they might think, oh, this will be good.
It's like a projector then, is it?
Yeah, this will be good for the people here, you know, they can all be at a dance or they can all be that. But, you know, what if there's somebody there who went to a dance and got raped that night or something like that? You know, I've got real issues, and it's about using evidence-based, isn't it? And knowing the individual enough.
And also being a bit suspicious of trickery.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure we should really do like that to grown-ups without thinking very carefully about it.
And that's the trouble. It might seem like a good idea, but people need to really think through things.
And the salespeople are so relentless.
Yeah.
Because we have endless arguments, things like the care show where they're flogging this stuff. And they say, oh, research shows. And you say, come on, tell us about the research. Give me the reference. Well, we asked 10 people in care homes. No, you can't say that. You just can't.
Surely the best thing to do is take them to the pub.
Yes. Or have a proper bar in the corner. I mean, sorry, you've been trying to say something for ages.
It was with the modern look for care homes. I believe a successful design is when it meets the changing needs of its inhabitants, no matter what group of society is living in that space or using it. But I really think a modern yet inclusive design could be achievable. So it doesn't have to be. I understand the link between personal belongings, but when it comes to just care homes in general, then you can have a modern look, but then at the same time you can keep with all of those.
You can, as long as you realise these are often people who can't work things out. So chairs must look like chairs.
Yes. Yeah.
If things look like what they are, because people are relying on intuition and cues, then why not?
Yeah.
But you do have to be careful, because some things look so zany.
Yeah.
The new magnificent new General Hospital in Glasgow, University Hospital, has got pink benches in the front hall with no arms or anything, and they zigzag. I really don't think people will understand they're for sitting on. Very snappy, but stupid. Really stupid. If you're worried about elderly people needing somewhere to sit, that's not the way to do it. Any other? Yes, please.
What do you think about the new development? I can't remember where it is. I think it's in the Netherlands. But they
Hochvecht.
designed each room in a different period of time.
It's not each room, it's each unit, each flat.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think? Does that?
We could talk at length, couldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
The clever thing about that place is that it does have units where people have something in common. So you have a posh one and a one for people who like handicrafts and things. And in terms of making friends easily, that's lovely. The actual design features are not that hot. And the whole concept of being in a village that's actually a block of flats with shops and everything, I'd have thought it's perfectly sensible, isn't it? People seem to have mixed feelings. Makes sense to me.
I think.
Do people know what we're talking about? Yeah. Okay. Go on.
I think the there's a very simple thing, which is space. You know, I'd rather spend the money on space than on sort of scene sets and things, because people can then customise them to whatever they want to do. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like doesn't mean to say that you might not still want to have books and records and all the things that make your
because you've got the space to do it.
Have a quality. So you need space.
You mentioned the thing that for me is the bit that really troubled me. You said there's a posh room, and I really struggle with the whole setup of those places because my grandmother was working class all her life. Why the hell should she have to go into the working class servants' room? I'd like her to have a bit of the posh, and I think that's really troubling. The whole kind of class.
It's not easy, is it?
It needs to be familiar to her. So if it's not
she might,
then
well, I think that's us being intensely patronising.
It is, but the answer may be to try your grandmother out in different places. because it is quite difficult to know what people will be happy in.
I think it's just a shame that, I feel they underplay the class element there.
Oh, we in Britain don't talk about it, and it's so important.
Yeah, and maybe in Denmark, it's a more equal society anyway, but...
Well, this unit we're talking about is in the Netherlands, and it's exactly not. I mean, what they have is a unit where there's tablecloth, silver, and the staff dress as waitresses. And then they have handicraft place with bicycles, and they have other ones with loads of kids' stuff in them. No, they've faced class in the eye. And they have one that's religious with a load of hymns and crosses and all the rest of it. Well, you're in a dilemma.
I think they're condemning you by your class, effectively.
They are, but what you don't want is the ones for the working class people to be worse in any way. And that is certainly not true in Hockvik. The standard is the same throughout. But it's got a very different ambience. It hasn't got obsequious staff. It's got more going on in it, and it's more sociable, and there's more activities. And there isn't sherry all the time.
But why shouldn't my grandma, who was working class, enjoy those things? She would have enjoyed.
Well, she might have. She might have, but she might similarly have been utterly baffled. The problem we have in Scotland is people from remote rural communities who've always lived in a little two-room cottage somewhere, moving into a care home. Completely confusing. Doesn't look like anything that makes any sense at all. So it depends on your grandma, truly it does, and where she would be most relaxed and content. But you have to be careful you're not imposing your cringe on your poor grandma. And your right indignation that the posh homes are better.
I'm falsely using her as an example. I'm a social work lecturer, and I worked with older people, and I've been into many nursing homes. One thing that I wanted to ask you was, what did you think was the role, the role of music and sound? Because many nursing homes have their radios tuned into Radio 1 throughout the entire building.
I spend my life turning it off.
It never seems to get thought about.
No, there's a lot, we could do a whole session on music, couldn't we? But this meaningless sound becomes noise very quickly. It has to mean something. I was at a care home recently where they had this, I don't know which radio it was, but it was endless music. And then suddenly there was a classical piece. And an elderly gent who'd been sitting like this suddenly perked up and started looking round. And I thought, what the hell? That chap should at least have his own playlist, even if he doesn't maybe have his own little lounge with this kind of music. It was disgraceful, I thought. It drove me nuts having the bloody music on all the time. It's so thoughtless, isn't it? Yeah, no, but... Go on. This is your session.
I'm a GP, and I just wanted to say I have some reservations about dementia villages. I wonder that we're creating ghettos.
I think it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
I think some people feel more relaxed and safe, and some people, it wouldn't suit them at all. They want to be with kids, they want to be with younger people. It sounds as if that's what you would want. And we need to make sure we provide that option as well.
But I just wanted to ask you about trickery, actually, because I'd heard of a scheme in one care home where they put the number of the house that had been important to the person during their life on the door of the room with the actual numbers so that the staff would know.
And that's all okay, and we recommend that. You don't have to have the number of the room on the door. It's for the fire safety people, so it has to be somewhere, but it can be high up. But some people prefer their own house number. But what always annoys me is when people get the message and then they do it to all the rooms. And, you know, there might be 3 people who could remember their house numbers. That just makes things even more muddly because no one can find anything. So it's this notion that there are single solutions is a total misunderstanding. But for some people, I've seen that work really well. Or maybe the name of their house, or the door knocker from the house. In Norway, you can take the whole door because their doors are standardized. So they do that sometimes. Just shift the door. You've got to do what works for that person. But finding your bedroom door is really important. And I often in places when I say how many of your residents can find their own door, and they look at me and say, look, these people have dementia. They can't find their own door. And the reality is all the doors are identical, so How could they?
And that's particularly difficult when people have just gone in for respite.
Yes, isn't it?
And they're then the ones who come out of respite care with a reputation for wandering into other people's bedrooms.
I was in a respite unit which I thought had a clever trick with that. They had everything you could imagine on the door. They had a door knocker, a nameplate, a number, a colour. And they said if you have people for a short period, you need multiple queues because you don't know which one is going to work. And I thought, at least they thought about it. But it is a challenge, that, isn't it? And what you really need is the relatives to say, Mum will find it if you put a potted plant near it. Or, I don't know, a picture of her dog or something. That was the ideal. Any other?
I think that, that the key is in the person's history, isn't it? And individuality, thanks. I mean, one lady was really annoying her relatives because she lived in a 1930s semi and she was in her 80s. But she, every night before she went to bed, she was weeing in a bucket in the kitchen. And they couldn't understand this and getting really annoyed about it, especially if she sat on the bucket and it spilt and that. But then she started getting more and more about, this isn't my house. And it was a childhood home, 2 up, 2 down terrace with an outside toilet that she was insisting that she lived in. And then it all started to come together about why she was weeing in the bucket at night, because she didn't want to go down to the toilet in the backyard. You know.
You get the weeing in a bucket with groups in Scotland like shepherds, who've lived at least part of the year in very rudimentary accommodation with a bucket. And I just say, provide a bucket for heaven's sake.
Do we know?
Yeah. Make sure it's a solid bucket. Shall we plough on? How are we doing for time? Can you stand a bit of research? Some more. So, see you, Gladys. This is a slightly more tedious stuff, but it gives you some... Oh, here are some examples of mine, by the way. What do you think is going on the left? What do you think that is?
Before I go, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go on.
In your opinion, what's better, person with dementia, pictures or writing?
Depends on the person with dementia.
So do you think it would be better
Got to know them.
just have both?
My dad stopped being able to read.
Right.
So if you're talking about signs, always have both.
Always have both.
Yeah. And hold firm, because that's important. Are you students off? This is a row of students. I was warned that they were going to be here, and they clearly have to go off to something else. So thank you for coming. You've got to go out and change it for us. You do understand that, don't you? They're all architects, designing our care homes and things. There's just some examples. That there is the flush in the Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, but I think that's extraordinarily misleading sign. I think that you're meant to imagine it's going to spray something on you. And this is Holiday Inn. Have anyone been to Holiday Inn recently? They've done a revamp and they've chosen this carpet throughout. I've been in 3 with this carpet. But that's the worst, because that's a stair. I mean, that is truly perilous for any of us. It's awful, isn't it? Yeah. Someone should say to them, this is dangerous. But it's
normal people that look horrendous.
Yeah. No, I think it's shocking. But they've got this stuff in the corridors, which is a bit unnerving. But I think on the stair, it's really dangerous.
I'd struggle with that. If I got bifocals in.
Yeah. But we all would. I thought you were required to have nosings, you know. Crackers. The one on the left is the new lift in the Southern General in Glasgow. And if you're cool and calm, which you really are when you're in a hospital, you read the instructions. But I didn't, and I was late, and I could not work. Fortunately, all the other visitors could work it and told me what to do. You press it, and then the number of the lift there's about 8 lifts. The number of the lift that's going to meet your requirements will then come up in that little pane. That's quite a lot of working out. And more unnerving still, you get in the lift and there's no buttons at all. You just have to pray that it works. And this makes me laugh. This is the airport in Bristol Airport. I'm not at all sure you'd know what to do. You certainly wouldn't if you had visual problems. It is actually a lever tap. If you didn't have visual problems, you might work out that there's the lever. But any piece of equipment that requires a sign like that is faulty. It just shouldn't happen. So quick bit of talk on research, and my colleagues just done a big literature review on this topic, and we picked out all the bits of research that relate to distressed behaviour. I mean, it's much bigger than this, so just a few ones. And it's clear when you read all the research that you can't really separate out the model of care. It's all the research is hospitals and care homes from the design of the place, because one affects the other. You also can't get it right for everyone. So places that I go into that say, oh, we don't have mirrors because people with dementia get upset with mirrors. You say, oh, come on. Some people get upset with mirrors. Most of us quite like to have a look in the mirror before we head out in the morning. And no one feature is going to solve all the problems. And people are always asking us, what are your key messages? And you say, it's not like that. So here's a few examples. Wilkes found that you can reduce verbally agitated behaviour with single rooms, more personalisation of bedrooms, this business that we find so difficult. External access is so important, isn't it, being able to get outside. I've told my person who's got my power of attorney that I don't care where she puts me, but I've got to be able to go outside or I'll go bonkers. Low found association between higher incidence of harmful behaviours and strong security measures. The health and safety maniacs don't do people any good at all. Shared rooms, not surprisingly, higher care needs, less staff availability and training. Seisel, good bloke. If you read any of his, he's a very good researcher in this field, and he writes readable books. And he knows how to eliminate the other factors that may be influencing it. So you get lower aggression and agitation with more privacy, more personalisation, and more residential character, exactly what we've been talking about. And an environment that makes more sense to people. All straightforward stuff. Cohen Mansfield, who's hugely prolific in this field, written and researched at enormous length, American. Pacing most frequently observed in the corridor. I'm currently very interested if any of you want to join in helping me work out where things are happening. I'll tell you how to do that, and I'd be delighted to talk to you. And I've got some cards if you want to follow me up. And verbally agitated and aggressive behaviours in the toilets, which again is understandable if people are having intimate care and they're uncomfortable with it. So it's none of it very surprising. Juice found sound level significant, which we've talked about. And here's a piece of research that looks as if it's advocating trickery. Murals on fire doors is what that is. I don't know if any of you have seen this. Fake bookcases glued onto fire doors. What, of course, the research doesn't look like is, did that make people more confused? It may have stopped them going out, but they end up utterly bewildered. So I'm anxious about that. A circular pathway, I'm not sure about that either. So there we have it. It's none of it except this one saying anything very different from what we've said. And I thought you might be interested in I've spent the last year reading the research literature in prisons and schools and everywhere I could think of to look at why some layouts are more disturbing than others and cause more distress. Views of nature, there's tons of research on this at the moment. Journal of Environmental Psychology has every single issue about nature and the impact on people, and there's some very good research about it reducing stress, anxiety and frustration. Also, you get better after surgery more quickly, but that's nothing to do with dementia. Gardens reduce aggressive behaviour in people with Alzheimer's disease. I mean, you just know that, don't you? But somehow it seems to be important to have evidence for it. I've got if anyone wants a copy of this, let me know and I'll send you them because the references are all at the end. And light, Foz will talk about this at length if you switch him on, about the importance of bright morning light to set our circadian rhythm going. And a lot of people with dementia have very disturbed circadian rhythm and get up in the night and get agitated. So you need a circadian rhythm to be alert in the day and sleep at night. And not getting enough sleep is not clever when you have dementia. It's hard enough when you've slept well. And there's some very interesting new evidence that bright light also activates our frontal lobes, which is the bit of our brain that controls our behaviour. So I can give people references for that. And acoustics, back to noise. We go on and on. Two things people in my field go on about. One is noise and the other is toilets. But noise is unwanted sound, sleep deprivation, raised blood pressure and stress, stress staff. It's absolutely an issue in prisons and schools and hospitals. I don't know if you've seen the BMJ's correspondence last year about noise levels in surgical wards, which are way above the danger level. It affects your health if it goes above 65 decibels, and a lot of surgical wards are operating at 80. Bad for the patients, but terrible for the staff. So it's quite a beginning awareness about it. And I think the reference, which is Geen and McCowan, that noise which isn't controllable leads to aggression and anger makes sense, doesn't it? This endless music when you can't turn it off would really drive you nuts. So if you want to help me with my research on layout, I would love to talk to you. So, do we talk further? We've got got to 1:30, haven't we? Do you want to talk about colour? Or do you want to talk about other things on your mind? I'm easy.
Just go back to the sound.
Yeah.
I mean, very often the television is on all day in the sitting room.
Yes.
It's on for the staff.
Yes.
Rather than the patient.
And what do you do about it?
Yeah.
When I turn it off, they get all puffy and aerated, and the patients like it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's because it gives an illusion that there's something going on, when actually it's absolutely damn. But if you sit down beside the residents and say, "Oh, are you interested in so-and-so's cooking?" They're not watching it at all. Yeah. Yes, they're not watching that either. They don't follow it even. It's awful, isn't it? One of our Australian colleagues does a very good lecture on how to improve quality of life in care homes and hospitals, and his number one thing is turn the televisions off. But I don't know what we do about it. And even more serious, which I've seen, and you will have too, is where the telly's on with the sound off, but the radio's on. And it just must be utterly bewildering. I don't understand why people don't see that.
My little story is about the actual remote control. I think remote controls are really badly designed for anybody with any disability, or anybody. In the sense that the magic beam is coming out of the end, but if you need to look at the buttons, it's pointing at the ceiling.
So it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. But you're pushing the buttons and it doesn't work. And I don't know why somebody decided it should.
Why it couldn't come out the back?
Why it couldn't come out the back, or come out the end and the back.
Have you spoken to any product manufacturers?
No, it's
because we're increasingly being consulted by product manufacturers. I mean, they're alive for it. There's profit here, but they need to be told.
Once you've seen somebody.
The whole thing's obvious once you've got some level of awareness. But otherwise, you'll know what these are. If you wouldn't mind passing them around and helping yourself to a few. I need them back because I think B&Q are getting a bit suspicious of me constantly raiding their Dulux colour things. Shall we plough on? So there's a lot of nonsense talked about colour, and you hear people standing up and saying, as I did last year, saying, well, red is the dementia colour. What? Where does that come from? I don't know. But she was an architect. She was deadly serious. And you get a whole lot of mythology about some colours encourage eating. I was in a unit in Derbyshire which was a pretty sort of peach colour, probably invisible to the ageing eye actually, but anyway. And they said there's research that shows that this colour peach encourages people to eat. And so I gave her my card and said, well, that'd be really, really interesting to see that research. It's a lot of preferences disguised as serious research. So this is all these things, every single topic I've covered, we do a whole session on, so it's pretty sketchy. But colour, if you look at the web and look up colour, there's dozens of different I bet you as an architect were trained in loads of different classifications of colour.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that we know this contrast theory through the work we've done with people with special needs.
Yes, which is the same, isn't it?
What we do is we take a colour sample board and we photograph it in black and white to give us that tonal.
Grayscale is better.
Yeah, yeah.
We take our phones into all sorts of settings and go on. Do people know that trick? If you want to see if there's enough contrast, switch your camera to grayscale and point it. And if you can't see the item, the contrast is not sufficient. It's really easy and way of doing it. Anyway, so colour is three different things: hue, tone, and Dulux call it brightness, and some websites call it lightness, and saturation, which Dulux, which is this thing, call chroma. So we start with hue. On your colour charts, hue goes from the small numbers to the big numbers. So, hold on. Amethyst showers. Yes, no, I'm not explaining that. I'm explaining the numbers at the top. I'm running ahead of myself. Do you see on the top of each little thing there's a row of numbers? The first number is hue, the second number is tone, and the third number is saturation. And if you look at this chart I've put up, the left-hand one, which is called amethyst shower, you know, Dulux get a bit carried away with the names of things, and that one has a hue of 6 RB. It has a tone and light reflectance value of 76 and a saturation of 56, very unsaturated, basically. That pale one on the left. Is that all right? So this is a homemade slide, and I'll need to improve it. At least I can explain what it is. It's really talking what these numbers are. So the top one, the hues, are in the YY range, which is the ones that are yellowish. And the bottom one is in the blue-green range, so it's BG. So hue has 2 letters and then numbers. And this is the same thing I've just said. Hue is the first number, LRV is the second number, and saturation is the third number. And if you're looking at light reflectance values, what you need to notice, for example, is that yellow and that blue are the same tone. So if people would say to us, but the floor's so boring if it's all the same colour. It doesn't need to be the same colour, but it must be the same tone. So you could have a floor that was yellow and blue, which might be nice for the staff, but it would have to be the same tone. And that's how you work it out, along with looking at it in grayscale. Is that all right? So hue is usually presented on a colour wheel where the colours go back and meet themselves in the red range. But the trouble is that the ageing eye is less able to see hue, especially in the blue, green and purple range. So we regularly have to say to people, they say, I've been in units, you must have too, where they say, this is the purple unit, and this is the blue unit, or this is some fancy name. And people couldn't see. So one elderly gent who just had his room painted seized us when we were going past and said, I haven't painted my room. They've left me with the plaster. And they painted it a very pale blue, but of course he couldn't see that at all. So he was really offended. He needed at least one wall, a nice deep colour. Don't assume people can see hue at all, because as you age, the older you get, the less likely you are to see colour at all. Hasn't happened to me yet, I think, the colour differentiation, but presumably as my lenses get more fibrous, I'll get less and less able, except for the navy blue and black, to see colour. And don't rely on it for orientation. Is that all right? Light reflectance value, as you can imagine, is numbered 1 to 100, where black, which has no reflection, is 0, and white, which has 100%, is 100. But of course, you never get things that black or that white. and it's about the amount of light that is reflected, because it's absolutely essential to judge contrast. This is a Northern Ireland care home where he's got vinyl. Actually, it was a sorry tale for this guy. The guy was putting the floor down, said, we can't get such and so maple, so we've put down such and such else maple, without checking the LRVs. So this care home's got all its bedrooms where the floor is too much lighter than the hall. So they're going to have endless problems of people doing this when they come in and out. And he'll have falls in there. But he couldn't afford to, it's got 30 bedrooms to change it. But that was a big slip on his part. He should have been on top of it. The other complication, which is the reason I chose this slide, I've got hundreds of pictures of floors, is that vinyl reflects more and carpets reflect less. So carpets invariably look darker. And you can buy, I don't know if you architects have got them, an LRV machine, which you put down on the surface and it reads it. And it always reads carpets with a lower LRV than you might expect. I'd love to have one of those, but they cost 650 quid, so I'm not going to get one. Good contrast, safe contrast, if you want things to be different, like the chair on the floor, has to be 30 or above. The sad thing is that chair manufacturers don't put the LRVs on them, on the furniture, and neither flooring, some do, Altro does. Some flooring's got the LRV on it, but you often have to ask or work it out. Take your colour wheel along. That's what we do. No contrast, a safe floor, for example, has 5 or less difference between one section of the flooring. I had a guess upstairs. We must be talking between that grey and the black. The black will be about 90 and the grey will be about 20. It's way out. It's really dangerous. And grayscale on your camera will do it for you if you can't find a way of actually judging the LRVs. Is that all right? I mean, there's one important, the most important message about dementia design is probably this one. If you're interested in preventing falls, making people move about comfortably. And saturation, which is intensity, the higher the number, the more intense. So this, again, that's the same strip as before. It goes from 56 to 308 in intensity. The aging eye is much more likely to see more intense colour. And the English hospital planning note that's just come out, I'm not sure if it specifies dementia. Has anyone designed hospitals who could tell me this? If it specifies dementia or it just has it, says the best colour is magnolia. And there's some sense in that you don't have to buy a lot of paint if the wall gets chipped. But most people won't see that. They just won't see that as being a colour at all. And it's you can define a space better with some really intense colour maybe on one wall. And B, if you want people to enjoy it and appreciate it, you've got to make it really intense. But people are a bit resistant to these very vivid, intense walls in hospitals and care homes, which seems an awful shame because they can be very dull places. But if you were painting your grand's bedroom, you might want to think about maybe behind her bed having a nice, intense colour that you like. Anything, because I'm nearly done.
There's a hospital ward that has been designed in Warrington Hospital to be quite dementia friendly, and they've actually used the magnolia as a way of if you like, preventing.
Yeah, it's very clever, isn't it?
From actually wandering into a place where it's not.
Isn't that sensible? Because it's quite invisible, so people wouldn't know it was a staff door. Does work, it's brilliant. And if you asked us how do you stop people going out of a fire door, we'd say paint it the same colour as the wall. And the fire officers will allow you to get rid of the push bar to open sign if you want, just take it off. And that makes a huge difference.
And what happens in a fire?
Oh, you have to have a very obvious green man. But most of these places are not expecting people with dementia to find their own way out. They're expecting the staff, you stay in your bedroom and then you get escorted out. So we've found the fire safety people, if you explain all this stuff, and exactly what you've said, that people going out of fire doors is a big problem, either because they ring an alarm and then all the staff have to tumble out after you, or people go out and the alarm doesn't go and then they're lost outside. Either way, it's a disaster. Much better to not have folk going out.
It was interesting what you were saying about the music.
Yes, I didn't say enough, but there's an enormous lot to say.
If you think about like works of art,
Yeah.
Vincent van Gogh, Mondrian, both artists were quite late in their lives and I assume had some deterioration of the eye. The use of vivid colours was incredible.
Isn't that interesting?
I find that kind of quite odd, really. And there are other artists, impressionist artists, that used amazing colour.
There's a book there for you, Rob. A second PhD on looking at older artists and whether they do. I bet it's true. I bet that's the case.
But we all are attracted to those kind of paintings. There's something about them.
The similar one, Rob, is that, and I think this is more cultural, but I think in this country we tend to be afraid of colour inside buildings, but we love colour in our gardens.
What's that about?
I don't know. I think it's just
Certainly at the moment, the trend is for Farrow and Ball, earthy kind of stuff. Not very helpful for people with dementia on the whole. But I don't know if it's more than recently. Yeah, please, go on.
But what you say about colour,
Sorry.
does the same apply to sound? That sort of bright colours, loud sounds?
Possibly, yeah.
You don't always want the sound too loud, no.
Personally,
or is it pitch?
I go off to sleep, with the sound of Radio 4 every night. Yeah, it's just.
Have you got tinnitus, Bob?
I don't know.
Because people with tinnitus often go to bed with
my
the...
hearing is going, but I do find it's very soothing to listen to the radio.
I think there's something about the pitch of the human voice.
It's interesting, he chooses talk radio, isn't it? Denise wants to say something.
Yeah,
Go on.
Sorry. I just had a lesson when I worked in a day hospital for people with dementia for 4 years. And we got to know people really, really well because some of them came 5 days a week, And one sharp lesson sticks in my mind, and that is, where the F is Elvis? Because I worked there from 91 to 95, and with Jill Pendleton, we both worked there. And we used to play lots of music like, in the 30s and 40s and everything.
Quite the wrong vintage.
And there was a lady who was about 90 at the time. So when Elvis was around at his height, she would have been in her 50s, say.
Oh, right.
And she was blind, and she was very, very severe with her dementia. And her hearing wasn't that good. And we were playing something from the 1940s, and she just shouted at the top of her voice, "Where the F is Elvis?" Full thing coming out.
But that meant she'd slip back to that period, didn't it? People don't always go the whole way back.
No, and it really taught us a lesson about making assumptions that just because she was that age group, or the group were that age group, 40s, 30s, 40s music, that we would play that music. It just really taught me a lesson,
I sing once a fortnight with people with dementia, and we don't sing war songs at all. Not one. We sing mainly show tunes. Presumably 40s and 50s, that's what they want to sing. You have to sort of recalibrate your thinking a bit, don't you?
There's been research done with rhythm with babies. That the first sound a babies hear is the mother's heartbeats and the blood going around. And they produced a record called Hush-By Baby, and they matched music with similar rhythms that sent babies to sleep. Now, dementia is a sort of regression in a sense. Would it be rhythm that works?
I certainly, with my dad, would spend a lot of time reading him old poetry, like Hiawatha, things with a tempo. He loved it. But it may have been because there was a familiar rhythm, and it may have been because it had rhythm, I don't know, but it was a lovely thing to do, because you couldn't always have a conversation, but he really loved you reading the poetry. I don't know about rhythm. I don't know much about the technical side of this, though I could send you a literature review, because I'm working with a woman who's done one.
There's a department in Sheffield University that have done a lot of research on effective music.
On people with dementia? Or generally?
Anybody.
Oh, right, she's do you want a leaflet? Because take one if you do. Yes, this is the one you want. I think we're probably just about done, aren't we? So do come and have a chat if you think you can help me with my layout work. And do help yourself to a leaflet here if you want. And do please return my colour slips. That will be very helpful.
Just thank Mary. We started about 2 o'clock, and I'm sure you could carry on for
all night, Bob.
Thanks very much, and it's a great coincidence that Bill and I have been doing this work around the book, and Mary's been able to come and join us, and has had personal support for being here from Neil Fossard and from Gladys, and I think that's really good. And I hope she comes back in the future. I'm sure she will. What I would say is there is tea and coffee and fruit juice and biscuits outside there, so please stay around if you want to talk to Mary some more. Quite nice if people do that and just continue the conversation. And thank you for Gina for coming today. Really good that you're here. So maybe we could give Mary a round of applause.
And to you. And to you.